Welcome to all our viewers to this program of Changing Tracks. Today we have with us Sister Kristina, who's from Connecticut, and she's a great example of how conversion is a daily decision, a daily task, that it's not enough just to say yes to the Lord once and then we're saints, but it's a daily yes that we have to give. So Sister Kristina, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, how old you are, and what your family was like growing up, and just a little bit of background history.
I'm Sister Kristina. I'm 23 years old, and I'm a servant sister of the Home of the Mother. And I have an older sister who is also a servant sister of the Home of the Mother. She's 4 years older than me. And I have a younger sister who's 6 years younger than me. And my family has always been Catholic, but it was like Catholic. I mean, we went to Sunday Mass, and we blessed the meals before eating. And my dad would always say our night prayers with us, but we weren't like really strong Catholics, like daily Mass, daily prayer, everything, no. I went to Catholic school all my life, and for me, like faith, it was there, but it wasn't like personal, it wasn't mine. And like in Catholic school, you learn all the things that you're not supposed to do. Like no to this, no to that, no to the other thing. And everything was negation, always, always, always. And so that's how I grew up. And for me as well, one of the things that, looking back now, that I wish I had had when I was younger, was our relationship. My relationship with our Blessed Mother was non-existent. For me, our Blessed Mother was like untouchable. She was like the Mother of God, and for me, she wasn't near me at all. But like I said, I went to Catholic school since I was 4 until I was 14. And I was a good, normal girl. I wouldn't say I was bad. But when I was 12, I started becoming a little bit rebellious.
Do you know why that was?
I mean, there was like a difficult family situation, and instead of talking about it, like it was like covered up. So I kept that all inside, and after holding inside so much, it just came out, but in a bad way. So like when I was between 12 to 18, I didn't live very well. I was homeschooled after I graduated from 8th grade, right? After that was the end of Catholic school. And I wanted to coincide in the university with this kid. So I was like, okay, I can homeschool, finish high school early, and go to this university. And so I asked my parents, I said, can I homeschool? I used the excuse of, I don't want to be corrupted in public schools. So
they believed you?
Yeah, they did. They believed me. So I went. I mean, I didn't go to public school, so I was homeschooled, but I didn't do anything for 2 years. So after that, my mom was like, "All right, I'm either gonna kill you." Not really, but she's like, "Or I'm gonna die of a heart attack, or we're gonna send you to public school right now," because the Catholic schools where I'm from are worse than the public schools. So I was like, okay, I don't want you to kill me, and I don't want you to die of a heart attack, so I'll go public school it is. So she sent me to public school. But during this time, my older sister, she went to university in Florida, and she discovered her vocation there in Florida, in the university. And one day she called us up on the telephone, and she was like, "Mom and Dad, I think I have a vocation." And she had just broken up with her boyfriend. So we were like, what are you talking about? It's like, I think I have a vocation. And my parents were like, what? With who? And she was like, with the Servant Sisters of the Home of the Mother. And they were like, who? So, because the Servant Sisters weren't very well known, and the Home of the Mother isn't very well known in the States. So my parents were like a little skeptical about that. So that November, my parents met with the founder of the Home of the Mother and the Mother Superior. And after that, they were like tranquilized a lot. They calmed down a lot because they saw that it wasn't like a sect or anything, but it was people who were really trying to live holiness. So after that, that was in November. And then that March, there was going to be a Holy Week encounter of the Home of the Mother.
And what's a Holy Week encounter?
A Holy Week encounter is like a get-together with the different branches of the Home of the Mother, servant brothers, priests, and sisters, and the lay families, and the youth as well. And we get together where we try to live in an intense environment, Holy Week, and Easter as well. And so that year, my whole family went down to Florida to live Holy Week. And there we had a very strong experience as a family. I really touched my parents a lot, and my little sister and I as well. We were very touched there. And there for the first time, I don't know. I remember I saw the sisters, and I had never seen nuns like that before, and I was like, who are these sisters in white? And I thought they were like crazy. But I remember leaving Holy Week, after the end of Holy Week, going back up to Connecticut, and I was thinking about them. I said, oh my gosh, like I've never seen people who are so happy all the time. I was like, is that for real? Are they always really happy? I was like, I want to be that happy as they are. Like, what is it that they have that I don't have? Whatever it is, I want that. And I remember for the first time, I experienced our Blessed Mother as my mother there in the Holy Week. Looking at the sisters, I feel like they irradiated our Blessed Mother. And for me, that was the first time I had a strong experience with our Blessed Mother as well. And I entered the home of the Mother of the Youth there in Holy Week Encounter, because from the beginning I felt like something that I had always wanted, and that was part of my being, but I didn't know what it was. So I was 14 then. And so we went back up to Connecticut, and my whole family like changed life. We would go to Mass as a family together before we went to school and to work. And then my sister, she was going to go to Spain to get to know the sisters more. And she said, Kristina, you want to come with me? I was like, yeah, go to Spain with my sister and to be with those nuns that I was left very intrigued. So I said yes. So we came here for 7 weeks, my sister and I. And there we had spiritual exercises. And I had never been in silence or in prayer or anything like that. And I don't think I lived them very well because I was 15. But I think the Lord took advantage of that anyway, because I went there with an open heart. And I can't explain what happened because it's really difficult to explain, but that was the first time that I felt the invitation of our Lord to come follow me. And I was only 15, so I couldn't do anything. But I talked to the father who was leading the spiritual exercises, and he was like, well, you're 15, we can't do anything. So you have to go back home and live your Christian life intensely. So I remember I went back home, and as soon as I came off the airplane, when my parents saw me, they were like, she's changed so much, because the first thing that they said was, you didn't have those smile marks before when you left. And because I had spent 7 weeks laughing and smiling the whole time, and I was really happy. And so I went back home, and I started to change. But after a month, it all went down. And it was back to what I was before. And so I lived really lukewarm that whole year. And that next year, my sister was going to enter the novitiate. So we went back as a family, and I saw the sisters again and again, that flame that I had that was big last year that had gone down again. It started getting bigger now while I was in Spain, being with the sisters and praying, starting to pray again. And when I was here, constantly the Lord wouldn't leave me alone. I could hear him in my heart, you know what you have to do and you know you have to live. But once again, I went back home. My family and I left Spain. We went back to the States. And again, for a month or two, I was living well my Christian life.
And why do you think that happened?
Because following the Lord requires you saying no to certain things. And there were certain things that I didn't want to say no to. It's really silly things, like music or friends, bad friends. I didn't want to say no to that. So you can't be living here and have one foot here and one foot there. You have to give yourself, and I didn't want to give myself completely. And so.
What made you get off track? What made you, when you went back after that month, just fall completely into the same old of every day?
I think it was my laziness. As a family, I said we would go to Mass, pray the rosary together, and Mass was at 6:15 in the morning. So it started okay, well, I'll go to 4:15, but then I'd never go. And I'll go tomorrow. But then after 2 or 3 days of making excuses, I would stop going to Mass. The same thing with the rosary. I'll pray later, and later never came. I think leaving prayer and Mass I didn't do really bad things. I wasn't going to the parties when they were doing drugs and drinking alcohol. But I was living a super, super, super lukewarm Christian life. And you can't live a lukewarm Christian life. So after that school year, in 2007, there was going to be a pilgrimage to Italy with the Home of the Mother. And throughout this whole time, like, I never left contact with the home because it was like a formed part of who I was, even though I wasn't living coherently. And so that summer I decided to go to Spain, and from there we're going to a pilgrimage to Italy. And there I received a lot of graces, a lot of graces. And I went back home after this pilgrimage, and it was my senior year in high school. And like, I knew the Lord was asking for my whole life. And in that pilgrimage, I decided, okay, like, I'm gonna finish this senior year, and after graduation, I'm gonna give myself completely to the Lord and stop fighting. So after I came back from the pilgrimage to Italy, like, I stopped living the worldly life, like, to the extreme. Like, I stopped wearing makeup and going out with boys or wasting my time on the computer. Like, I used to spend like hours on the internet doing nothing. And like, I stopped all that cold turkey and left it all to the side, and I would go to Mass. My dad would bring me to Mass in the morning, and I would do my daily prayer, the rosary, like, living a good Christian life. And being a testimony at high school as well. I remember one time in the class, my teacher was atheist in physics class, and one time he pointed me out because at the beginning of the school year, everybody wrote down what they wanted to be when they, like, finished high school, and I put, I want to be a nun. He was like, what? You want to be a nun? I remember explaining to all the students, and they were like, I remember this one popular kid, he was like looking at me like this. like admired, because, like, no, I don't know, I think they're admired to see, like, somebody who wants to live coherently their Christian life. And so that was the beginning of my senior year. And one day I used to work with my best friends at a convalescent home. We were waitresses. And one day I was sweeping the dining room, and I remember I thought I received a light from God. I was like, I remember, because I loved music. Christian music I used to listen to all the time, any kind of music, but at that point it was Christian music because it had good words, a good message. So this idea came to my head, and I said to my best friend, Rachel, I just had an inspiration from God. We have to start a Catholic radio station. And she was like, yeah, like, that's a really good idea. And so, like, all of the whole giving my life to God part completely went to the side, and I thought to myself, this is something really good. This is gonna help the souls, and I really think it's an inspiration from God. So I remember I was talking to my spiritual director, and I told her this idea that I thought was an inspiration from God, and she said, Kristina, like, you know what the Lord's been asking you for 4 years, like, don't be stupid. Like, you know very well what the Lord is asking of you, and this can be a temptation from the devil. And I was like, there's no way that this can be a temptation, because this is something good for the church, for the souls. This is something from God. And she was like, okay, like, I can't make you do anything, so you're free, like, do whatever you want. But just remember, like, all the things you've told me, and that the Lord has spoken to your heart, and He's asked you to be His. And so after that conversation, I stopped all communication with my spiritual director. I stopped going to daily Mass. I even stopped, I went to Sunday Mass because I knew not going was a mortal sin, but I stopped receiving communion because I knew, like, every time I received the Lord, like, He was asking me, like, screaming, like, you know what I want from you. And so after that point, like, I stopped receiving communion. I stopped praying, and I went really downhill from there. And after that school year, my older sister was going to make her first vows in Spain, and my family was going to go. And my parents were like, okay, Kristina, we're gonna go, but we can't afford your plane ticket, so you have to pay for it. And I was like, I don't wanna go. And on top of that, you're gonna make me pay? I was like, there's no way I'm going. They were like, Kristina, like, we can't pay for you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not gonna go. But in the end, they paid for me. And I went to Spain with my family. And there I talked to one of the priests, and I explained to him, I told him, listen, like, I have my life all figured out already, right? I'm gonna go to college. My dad is gonna get me a car. I'm going to college free because my dad works at the university, so I don't have to pay anything. I'm going to start a Catholic radio station for the good of the church and for the good of the souls. And that's my life plan. And I remember the priest said to me, he goes, why don't you come to Spain to discern, just to ask and open yourself up to the Lord's will? And I knew that this conversation was going to happen. So beforehand, I had prepared my whole response. I had it all in my head. And so when he said that to me, I blacked out and I looked at him and I said, you're right. When do you want me to come back? And as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, what am I saying? It's like, no, I don't want to say that. But it was really what I wanted to, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was coming out and it wasn't what I wanted to say. But at the same time, it was what my heart was wanting to say. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. That happens a lot to young people these days, where we want to say something, but it all comes out wrong. And it's funny because in your heart, you know what you want, and yet in our minds, we're convincing ourselves that it's something else. It happens all the time. Why do you think that happened? Just because I think a lot of people experience that these days.
Because I don't know, I think the heart is always wanting the truth, and I think when a person has to live the truth, I think that always implies like leaving things that you're attached to. And so like people don't want to say no to things that they like to do, and so they don't want to hear it, and they try to convince themselves. That's what I think.
So then when did you end up going back to Spain?
I did. After, this was in July, and so my family went back. And I didn't say anything to my family at that moment because I knew they were going to say, well, why don't you just say now? And so I wanted to go back to the States to live up the life until I went back to Spain, because for me, like in my heart, I knew like coming to Spain was coming to enter as a servant sister. And so I went back to the States. I didn't live very well. It was a constant back and forth. And so that September, I went to Spain, and every Thursday, the servant sisters have an hour of adoration. Like we have all night adoration, and we do turns of an hour. And so Mother had told me, she's like, okay, well, you must be like really exhausted from the plane ride, so like you're not obliged to stay up for the holy hour. And so I went to the house, and I remember being in the dining room, and there we have a bookshelf. So I was in the dining room, and there was something telling me, like, no, don't go to bed. He's waiting for you. He's waiting for you. Like, you have to go to the chapel. I was like, come on. Like, I'm exhausted. Mother gave me permission to go sleep. I want to sleep. I'm so tired. And there was something that would not let me go to sleep. And I was in the dining room, like, standing there like this, like, are you serious right now? I'm tired. And there was something that would not let me go. So I was like, okay, whatever. It's an hour, I'm gonna go, it's the Lord. So I went and I grabbed a book off the shelf because I was like, okay, well I'm gonna, like if I don't have something that I'm gonna read, like I'm gonna fall asleep. So I went and I grabbed a book off the shelf, and it was a book by Jose Maria Escriva. And I really have a big devotion to that saint. So I went to the chapel with this book in hand, and I love opening books at random. Like I never like look at the index to see what it, no, I always opened it up. So I took the book and I opened it up, and it was talking about freedom, man's freedom, and the good use of freedom and stuff. And I was reading it and I was like, I put the book down and I looked at our Lord and I said, all right, Lord, I don't understand why you give me freedom. I don't understand, because every time I use that freedom, I use it to hurt you. And so I said, look, I don't want my freedom anymore. And obviously, the Lord never takes anyone's freedom away, because then there's no love. Where there's no freedom, there's no love. But that was my way of expressing to the Lord, like, I don't want to hurt you anymore. Like, please take my freedom and do whatever you want with me. And I felt like the Lord was saying to me, like, you've known this whole time what I want from you. Can you just say yes once and just be mine? And I remember giving excuses to the Lord. Like a concrete example, it's like I'm really shy, and I don't like to have to speak in public. And I knew the sisters, like, our forms of apostolate is like talking to the youth. And for me, I was like, no, I can't talk in public. There's no way. And I was saying that to our Lord, and he spoke to me very clearly. He said, you're right. You can't do that. But if you just trust in me, like I can do that in you. And I kept giving him excuses like, oh, wearing that habit, I hate sweating, please, no. And like constantly, like, you know, Kristina, like you can't do that on your own. But with me, like you can. And so I was like, okay, fine, that's it. Like, I'm sick of saying no to you, and saying no to God always means a miserable life, like, because he wants us to be happy. And you're only going to be happy if you live what the Lord is asking of you. You're only going to be completely happy, fully happy, if you live what he asks of you. And so I was like, okay, fine. I want to be yours. So there in that moment in prayer, I said yes to the Lord. I said, okay, I'll be yours.
Why do you think so many young people these days are afraid to take that step and say yes to the Lord?
I think it's a fear of the unknown, because the Lord can ask whatever he wants, and that's scary sometimes. Like not knowing because I can be sent to Ecuador or to Italy, like one never knows what the Lord is going to ask. Like I think fear of the unknown puts a lot of barriers for the youth to the will of God.
And how did your relationship with Our Lady grow throughout this time?
Ever since the first Holy Week encounter, for me, I saw her as my mother. Like she wasn't like the queen of heaven there in a pedestal far away. You know, like she came down to me and she was my mother. I felt her very, very close.
And how can someone, because you had the grace of seeing the sisters, which helped you get to know Our Lady through them, but how would you help a young person who has no idea who wants to grow in the relationship with Our Lady but doesn't know how to do it?
I think it's like really common that people see her as something distant and far away, and she's not. She's our mother. And so I think, like how do you get to know a person? You start talking to them. And so I think talking to our Blessed Mother, like, I don't know, you're getting ready for school and say a little prayer to Our Lady, like, good morning, Mom. Like, help me today live as you did. Just constantly being in conversation with our Blessed Mother as well, with our Lord and our Blessed Mother, but talking to her because she's real. She's not just a fictitious person. She's alive as well.
And what would you say to a young person who's in this constant battle, kind of like you were with your conversion, that it was yes and then no and then yes and then no, and then receives graces but doesn't want it, but...
Now, I tell them not to waste time, because in the end, well, I hope so. I hope in the end the Lord always wins in those cases. But, I mean, we're always free. But I hope that the person opens their heart. But once they do open their heart, they're going to say, oh man, why did I waste so much time? Like, I could have given myself, I mean, the Lord permits it, but I could have lived much more.
And have you ever regretted saying yes to the Lord?
Have I ever regretted saying yes to the Lord? No, never, no.
What advice would you give to a young person who's watching this program right now, who was in your exact same shoes, who's going through that daily battle, who maybe can't even receive communion at Mass, like you said, because their conscience won't leave them in peace because they know that God is asking them of something, and maybe it's not even a religious vocation, but just to give that step of giving themselves daily to Him and living the true Christian life and not the lukewarm life like you were saying before. What would you say to someone like that?
In one phrase, don't be afraid, because the Lord, like I said before, He only wants us to be happy, and He takes away, but He gives so much. He gives so much more, so much more, so much more. So I would say, don't be afraid, because He wants you to be happy, and He'll fill you completely. Like, I don't know what else. That's it. Don't be afraid, young people. Don't be afraid.
Sister Kristina's story kind of went a little bit parallel with her vocation as well, but I think it's really important, like we were saying, to not be afraid, and no matter what your vocation, whether it's to get married or to become a religious or be a missionary or be a lay consecrated, whatever the Lord is asking of you, to not be afraid and to open your heart and to just allow Him to be your God, and to never apart yourself from the sacraments. The Eucharist, to not receive the Eucharist is not the solution. The solution is to open your heart and to receive the Eucharist daily if you can, and to live that love for Christ that He has for you, and to realize that He loved you first. So just to open your heart and don't be afraid. Like Sister Kristina said, don't be afraid. And we will see you all on our next program.